We have Professor Anthony Kila now joining us from Lagos. Good to see you, Professor Anthony Kila. Well, just like Sulai and I were, discussing earlier before we had to go on that very short break. I mean, it does seem that the president is saying there's a new sheriff in town. It's not going to be business as usual on the issue of cost of governance and cutting, excessiveness in public office. Your thoughts?
Yes, good evening. Yes, it appears so. I mean, there are, three dimensions to these. One is that without any doubt, the president has made a move that is morally and, as it were, popularly right. Generally, there's been a general feeling in the country that the government needs to act to cut profligacy, wastage, and indeed to show that the government is also making sacrifice, given that the whole town, or the whole country or the town to use it, where there's a new sheriff, is being asked to make sacrifice. That is a good move. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that people will soon see that if you look at figures itself, this cut will not actually turn the economy around. It just sends the good message. Well, it sends the right message to people to know that the government understands that these are tough times and they cannot keep going as if nothing is happening. The third side to this are those people who before the government has made this commonsensical, popular move, have been defending the government blindly. You see, it's good to call them out, to remind them that while some people were saying, look, the government needs to move in this direction, those fanatics and blind defenders for whom the government can do no wrong, they need to look at themselves now and realize that as citizens, maybe sometimes we ought to say what is right and not act as if it is not possible, it's not necessary until the government does it. So I think, 1 for the people, 0 for government defenders.
So at the end of the day, I recall we had this conversation after the COP summit in terms of the large number of people who were on that entourage. Now, help us make sense of what exactly, because sometimes it may seem as just a one-off. What will indicate that truly or rather the president is on a path that Nigerians would rally around him?
Well, I think you'll expect 2 things. 1 is declared action, and 2 is visible or transparent process. So the government of the future, the government that will be popular, that will respond to people's need, in 2024, should have started earlier, but we're here now, which is a good thing, will be a government that if it goes to a summit or goes to a trip, will be able to say, I'm going with these 12 people because these are the 12 areas they're going to be useful for. This is the reason why I am taking somebody from the health department, or this is why I'm taking somebody from this state instead of that state. So, we're going to talk about something that has to do with water. You'll expect somebody to you'll expect the president or whichever government to take people who are functional and relevant in area water, not to take somebody from the desert to go and discuss water matters. So you'll expect something that makes sense, that you can look at it and understand that this is why the government is spending this money, and this is what we expect from them. And when the time comes, or at the time they declare themselves, they should show that thanks to the trip we did, these are the 12 things that we've achieved. And that is why we took 12 people. And it's not, it's not rocket science to do that. It's just goodwill and a bit of transparency. That is what you want to see from people. Because we must remember, and this is important, that the economy is not great. So really, it's not the time to spend anyhow, because the money is not there. So everything that is spent, every step that is taken, should be justified and explained to people, and should be linked to result.
A former governor of Kano State, Ibrahim Shekara, is saying, look, it's not just cutting down on your entourage. There's a need to also cut down on the number of ministers that you have. About 48 now. A lot of people actually expected that under Tinubu would have fewer than in the last administration. Do you agree with that? I'd like you to address that point. And how best do you think President Tinubu can actually sustain this momentum in a way that it will be, it will become the norm?
Well, I think we have missed that boat already. It should have been done before. It hasn't been done. I personally think you do not need this amount of ministers, but I understand we have a structural problem. We have a constitution that states that every state needs to have a minister. So that's 36 ministers already. And this president is perhaps the most political president Nigeria has ever had, at least the most political of the Fourth Republic. So he comes with a baggage of a network of political people seeking political appointments. So it's very tough to ask him to reduce it. That I get. And it's not good for the system because, mind you, the need to have 36 ministers to represent each of the state is something that has to do with how flawed our system is, that we don't trust the system and everybody wants to be inside. And it also tells you the idea of being inside to go and do what? Because, in Nigerian politics, people go in poor, they come out rich, because they don't trust others to do with it. We all want somebody from our own part to be inside there. That's the weakness of the structure. So that, I think, it's gone past. What's he going to do? Start sacking people unless they catch them with their hand in the cooking jar. They can't just wake up and say, go home. We want to reduce the cabinet. That's going to be tough. What can be done, though, is that whilst you agree that, 48 ministers seems a lot, what can be done is that we need to find a way to make sure that these 48 ministers have 48 achievements. So that each one of them needs to be seen to say, justify your presence here. I think that's what we need to be looking at now. Because if the output can outweigh the input, then the presence of 48 ministers or more can be justified. That said, it looks, bloated in an era of, in 2024, an era of technology and light mechanisms and systems. But but that's where we are. It's a Nigerian peculiarity because everybody has to be inside. What the president and the presidency can do is to make sure each one of them actually achieves something.
On the issue of, what needs to be done now to sustain the momentum and not, this situation not just be a flash in the pan in terms of reducing the cost of governance and wastage.
Well, I think, in terms of reducing, cutting the entourage, cutting the expenses, are things that can be done. But interestingly, whilst I understand the moral demand and the popular angle of asking people to cut wastage, and it is true, because, for example, the amount that has been budgeted for the health of government, i.e., medical health of government and the National Assembly, the amount that has been budgeted for the library, they seem ridiculous. Especially, they seem ridiculous standing alone, but they appear very ridiculous when you compare them to what is going on in the rest of the country. If you compare the budget of education to the budget of the National Assembly and to the budget of other things, they appear ridiculous. But I am not really for somebody who cuts the input. I am more for the output person. I'm a supply side person. I'd rather we focus on what each person does, than how much we're spending to them. So left to me, if Nigeria was a company that I manage, an industry, I wouldn't be asking to reduce the number of staff. I'll be asking for each staff to produce more things, gain more market, and increase our output. That is what I'll be looking for. And this is a mindset that goes beyond government itself. There are ministries, those who travel across Nigeria. There are parastatals, there are agencies, there are government offices where people do nothing. They just sit down there. Just even walk into some of our essential services providers, once they're not in the eye of the storm. There are people who are just assumed there, and they have, you go to their office, and offices, and it looks a moribund place. We need to make people productive.
Well, I think it looks like a fine place for us to leave it here. Professor Anthony Kila will need to make our country and our agencies more productive. Many thanks for speaking with us tonight on Newsnight.